Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kieran. In today's video, I would like to talk with you a little bit more about the process that I've been through with learning more about my bipolar disorder. I want to first start by saying thank you all so much for the kindness and the support that you've shown me over the past, week since I posted the video about my struggle with bipolar disorder. And I'm just so grateful for all of you and every single kind comment and the people who have shared their stories with me, and it's just been so important and so such a great feeling because I was really nervous to share this with you all, and I felt like a virtual hug from everybody, if that makes sense, and that was really helpful. And I also was so grateful for the people who were saying that this was going to help other people, that me talking about my journey was going to help other people, because I that's what I want, but I never, I never really thought that it could help somebody, if that makes sense. Like, that's my goal, but the idea that my words and my story are really helping people, that means so much to me. That's what this is about for me. This is about educating people and helping others understand what bipolar disorder is. And it's, for me, very similar to the journey I've been on with my severe obsessive compulsive disorder. I want to educate people about what the disorder really is, to let people know, that it's not as it's portrayed in the movies or on TV, that there are so many other layers to it, and that people are living with these disorders every single day and struggling and trying to find their best path through life. I just want to say thank you to all of you for being so supportive and kind while I'm starting to share this journey with you. And in today's video, I would like to talk with you a little bit more about how everything happened and how bipolar disorder was brought up as a potential diagnosis, just to give you a little bit of an insight as to what that process was like. I guess to understand it, you need to also understand that I have a phobia that I've had since I was a young child, and the phobia is of getting sick, of getting ill, throwing up, and that has been as long as I can remember. That's like an important part of this story. I did do a blog post on that many years ago. I'll link that in the comments if you want to go see that. It goes a little bit more in depth in that story, so you have an idea of like sort of one of the bigger parts that impacted like the seriousness of what happened later on. I've always struggled with my emotions for as long as I can remember. I would have a lot of mood swings. I would have a lot of just difficulty controlling my emotions. Like, I would have periods when I would laugh so much that I would cry, but like in like what's the word, frenetic, is that the right word? In like a not a calm way, in like a very uncontrolled way. And so that's happened for as long as I can remember. I've also had a history of panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and I never really understood what those were or what was causing them. And for the longest time, I didn't even know that that was what they were. I just thought that for some reason I wasn't able to control my emotions, and or that like a bunch of bad things were happening to me, if that makes sense. That's been something I've always struggled with quite a bit too. I've always had like manic periods and depressive periods, but over the past several years, I've had more like long-term manic and depressive periods. So a few years ago, I had a stretch of time when I was sleeping constantly. I couldn't, be awake. I, would go to sleep all night, eat something, go back to bed, and just constantly sleeping. And I was trying a new medication at the time. I was, we had dealt with a miscarriage as well. And so there were a couple things that like were kind of contributing to that. At least that's what I thought. I was, thinking, okay, that's probably what this is, but it was like the most serious depressive period that I've had. And I've also dealt with the OCD the entire time as well. Like, that's always been the constant. And so that was like a major depressive episode that I had. And during that time, I was meeting with a therapist and a psychiatrist, and, they saw it as depression because that's what they were seeing. Those were the symptoms they were seeing. But throughout that time, I would have periods of time when I would be what they call manic. And that's, for me, was periods where I wasn't sleeping a lot. When I was sleeping, I was waking up a lot during the night and being awake for long periods of time. I was creating like to-do lists on a Sunday afternoon that were like miles long of things that I was bound and determined to get done by the end of the night. And if I didn't get them done, I was devastated. So Sundays before going to work, back to work for the week, were always really hard for me because I was putting so much pressure on myself to get everything done. And like, I was struggling really hard to just be okay with not checking off every single thing on my to-do list all at once. I had, periods of like that over the years where I would, set these unrealistic goals, have some difficulty sleeping, and just kind of like be really, really up, I guess is the word you could say. Like, I would have periods where I was not like overly happy, but just thinking I could do anything and everything. That would usually coincide with me having, like, we would always call it like a crash. Like, I would be up and, feeling like I was on top of the world, and then it would just, like, I would just completely slump down in my emotions and have a panic attack, start crying, just like a variety of things. And Sean's always been really good of like noticing sort of when I'm starting to act that way and try to keep me like level as best he can. He's amazing. So thank you so much, Sean. He's downstairs right now while I'm filming this. I always had those periods where that would happen. I'd have these depressive episodes and then these manic episodes. But like I was saying, and I'm sorry that if this video is kind of hard to follow, it's kind of hard for me to explain it, but I want to try to put it into words as best I can. So a few years ago, sort of when my OCD was starting to get really bad, is when I was noticing more like long-term depressive periods and more long-term manic periods. Again, I didn't see those as those things because I just thought, okay, like I'm just experiencing some, difficult times in life, and that's that. And then, I was just thinking, oh, well, when I was manic, I was just having days when I was feeling a little bit better, I, could function a little bit better. But then the depressive episodes got a little more intense and long-term, and then the manic episodes did as well. And so leading up now to what prompted this possible diagnosis, likely diagnosis, and relating to the fear that I have. So just so you know, I'm going to be talking about stomach flu and that kind of stuff. And if you're sensitive to that, I put a disclaimer at the beginning of the video, but I just want you to know what I'm going to be talking about because this would be triggering to me. So I want to make sure that other people know what I'm talking about. I don't know the exact month. It was last winter at some point. I was having a period of time when I was feeling really manic, and I didn't know that that's what it was, but I was feeling off. I guess that's how I'll say it. I was having this period of time when I was feeling really off. I was feeling like emotionally I was more like in tune with my emotions, but like in a really deep way, I was like more susceptible and more aware of my emotions, I guess, than I was before. Like I felt like I could feel everything more, if that makes sense. All of the highs and the lows, I felt like I was more, at that time, more able to feel things emotionally. And I had like a couple week period like that where I was just feeling really like hypersensitive. That's the word. I was feeling hypersensitive to everything around me, all of my emotions and every thought I was having. And that coincided with me like not sleeping. Like I would be awake, or like I would go to bed and then I would be awake for like 4 hours in the middle of the night, just awake. Like I could not sleep. And then when I was sleeping, I was also having extremely vivid dreams, and they weren't nightmares, they were just really intense. That's like a good word. They were vivid, they were intense. And I was contributing it to a medication that I was on at the time. And I'm still on that medication. I hadn't had an increase in dosage or anything like that. I was just like, oh, this is a side effect from the medication. Kind of just brushed it off. But like it just kept getting more and more intense, where I was just more fixated on my emotions, more fixated on how I was feeling things and what those feelings meant. The sleeping was getting worse and the dreams were getting worse. And it just was like, it was almost just like all boiling up, if that makes sense. And I just felt like I was feeling every single emotion I could possibly feel at once. But I also didn't want to admit that, if that makes sense. Like I was like in denial that I was feeling this way. And I was just like, oh, it's my medication. It's nothing to think about or anything. And so then one night it was kind of like building up, which it kind of happened. I would be okay. And then it would sort of like start to build up, and then I would, not feel great. And so I was starting that night to write down things that I was feeling. And so I remember I was having a hard time sleeping, and I started like writing in my phone, like just the feelings I was having, the thoughts I was having. It turned out that I had the stomach bug, and it was like that was starting. So my body was feeling off at that time because of the stomach bug. Like I was in a manic state, but I had this stomach bug thing kind of brewing, and that triggered it for me to like sort of make it a really intense and uncomfortable experience. And so what ended up happening was I ended up getting sick, and like, I'm sorry if this is TMI, but that's just, this is what happened and what caused me to feel so ill. And it was just like the switch that like turned everything else on, if that makes sense. It was just like the flame that ignited everything else. And I felt like I felt like I lost it. Like poor Sean, we didn't sleep for like days. And he was helping me, and I was not working at the time. I was, I had a sub come in and stuff like that. And he was he was so helpful and so kind during that. But I couldn't get comfortable to sleep, and then feeling ill was giving me panic attacks because of my phobia. So it was just like this never ending cycle of, being sick and then panic attacks because I was feeling sick, and just this like over like this, it was just like constantly going around and around and around, and I couldn't get control of it. A couple things I did during that time. I took a few days off of school for it because I was so ill. The first thing I did was I texted my therapist. I mentioned this in the last video when I talked about this. I texted her and told her, I don't feel good, and she had me call her. And we talked, and she was really helpful. She had reminded me of some strategies that we had worked on in the past, but I still wasn't feeling good. And I was so sick. Like I don't even know. I can't. I feel like I want to tell you guys more of what happened, but I'm like not quite ready to explain everything, because I feel like explaining like this additional layer of everything, it's just really, really personal, and I think at some point I will share, but I'm just not quite there yet. But I just really didn't feel well. So she, said to me, she reminded me that like, this will only last a little while. You will feel better. But in that moment I felt like it was forever, and that's what anxiety does to you. And she was just really kind and helpful. I was sick for a couple days with this stomach bug. My psychiatrist called me. When he called me when I was ill, he was, saying like, I want you to try this mood stabilizer and see how this works for you, if this is something that will help you. And, I didn't really quite understand at the time why he was saying mood stabilizer, because I think actually at that time he might not have even mentioned bipolar disorder. He was, just saying, you're having like a mood episode of some type, like let's try this medication and see if this will help you. And it wasn't until later, when I wasn't like actively manic, that we had the conversation about it. I also utilized the crisis line that my hospital has, and many hospitals have the crisis line, where you can call if you're having a mental health crisis, and there are people that can talk to you, which is super amazing. I've utilized it a few times, and I just want to say, like, do not be afraid to utilize that. It's something I've used in times of crisis, and they've always been really helpful and really kind. I can only speak of my experience with the crisis line that is in my area, but I've had really great experiences. And so it was over 2 nights when the nighttime was the worst, when I was really sick, physically and mentally. And I called them during that time, and it's 24 hours. Somebody picks up, and is able to talk to you. And they also said to me, this is going to pass, this is a lot of emotions, and they were saying helpful things. Like, they're saying, like, you are feeling a lot right now, but this will pass. You will feel better. Just, try to relax as best you can. Those were some of the resources that I used during that time. And then once I was feeling better, because just like my therapist said, I did start to feel better, that, I was able to start taking the medication and start the process of going through therapy for this particular disorder. And I also started therapy to work on a lot of trauma that is so intertwined with everything else that I'm struggling with OCD, phobia, and now bipolar disorder. Since I've started the medication, I've had mainly some good periods. I have definitely not experienced the same intensity of mania or depression that I had felt in the past. I have had to increase the dose once with the psychiatrist's guidance. It's been a journey, and I hope that it's not way too confusing the way I'm explaining it to you guys. I know sometimes I'm sort of like explaining things but not explaining everything, and like I said, there is a component of all of my mental health that is critical in fully understanding what I'm going through, but I'm not quite ready to share it yet. And I know that's like being secretive, but I just want to make sure that if this doesn't completely make sense, there's a reason why it's not completely making sense. And that's, as someday I'm hoping to be able to feel comfortable enough to talk about it. So that's really what happened. That's really was like the start of the bipolar disorder diagnosis, was this event when I had the stomach bug and was also in a manic state at the same time. And it was just sort of like the clashing of two worlds that created this perfect storm of sickness, mental and physical sickness. And I'm not grateful for it. I didn't want it to happen, but I am grateful in a sense that it did, because it gave me a lot of clarity on what I'm struggling with, and I feel much more in control of it now. I feel much more aware now, aware within my feelings, but not in the way that I was when I was sick. That like when I was sick, that I felt like I could feel all my feelings like super strong. This is more like I'm more aware of how I'm feeling, and if I'm starting to not feel good, I'm more careful of watching myself, be aware of how I'm feeling, and be respectful of how I'm feeling, if that makes sense. That's a little bit of my story. It's not everything, but I hope it makes sense. I feel like I just blabbered on and on. It's just hard for me to talk about it in a clear way because it wasn't a super clear path. It took some, going back and forth. There are components to it that I just haven't shared yet that I feel like would make more sense in terms of the entire story. I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit more about my journey. I want you all to know that if you're struggling with your mental health, that I want you to know that it gets better, that there are people that are willing to help, and systems in place to help you, organizations that can help, that you're not alone. Don't be afraid to reach out when you need help, and don't feel like, just don't be afraid to ask for help, because help is definitely there. I've reached out. I've learned to start reaching out, and I'm so grateful that I've learned about the systems that are in place for me to support me and other people who are struggling like me. Because in the past I thought like, oh, well, that's not meant for me. Like, I always felt like those services, like, I shouldn't take a spot in line that somebody else could be using, because I needed the support. I am also somebody that needs the support. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. I want you to know that I'm here for you, that I understand what you're going through, and I'm proud of you for starting your journey. And I know it's hard. I know it's really, really hard. It's worth the fight. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's worth the fight. And I'm really grateful that I've fought, and I'm where I am in the process. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'm sorry if this video is really scattered. I'm having a hard time kind of talking about it, just because it's a little more detailed and more personal than I've gone so far with it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. Bye.